everybody, and welcome to the Good Stories Podcast. I'm Jody here with Steven, and I want to talk really quick about the way we choose new episodes, new stories each week. So, brother, putting you on the spot a little bit, how would you describe the way we choose what to do next?
Eclectic.
What's most eclectic?
No, it tends to be, when we first decided to do this show, which can you believe that's been over a year? That still blows my mind. We did sort of a brainstorming brain dump of, hey, what would be great stories to talk about? And it was pretty much our favorite stories. And so we did a whole huge list of that. And then ever since, we plan, several ahead, but it's usually a combination of how much time do we have, what have we been reading recently, and what books do we actually own? Because getting a hold of the books can be a challenge. And then we're fairly flexible in adjusting based off of those criteria.
Yeah, sometimes books are late, so then we switch. But I don't know, it's one of the questions I get, like, how do you choose your episodes? And I like to do ones that people may have heard the name. Like we just did Alexander the Great. Everybody's heard the name Alexander the Great, but you might not know much about him. The other part I like is putting the juxtaposition. Mm-hmm. So last week was this epic tale of the amazing life of Alexander the Great. I mean, the great is in his name. So this week, we're going to do a fairy tale.
Yeah. And I love that switch, too. I love the bouncing back and forth between different styles because, as you and I have always talked about books, a lot of the conversations have always been, what are you reading now? And it's that range, that spread of different things that has been so interesting, and I like that.
So today's is a sweet fairy tale, I'd say in the ilk of Jack and the Beanstalk, although you might not have heard of this one unless you already love George MacDonald. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's do our top 5 download locations this week. So thank you out there to Grand Prairie, Canada, Long Beach, Washington, Delta Junction, Alaska, St. Paul, Minnesota, and Powell, Ohio. Thank you for listening. But yes, this week is a fairy tale, kind of a classic fairy tale that I don't think most people would know. Unless, as I said, unless you already know George MacDonald, the teacher. So we've done several episodes from things that George MacDonald's writing by now, actually. But our last one was Fantastes, which was this epic novel. It's just wonderful and imaginative. But he also wrote novels and love stories and fairy tales, which took me to a C.S. Lewis quote. And I'm curious if you think he actually wrote this, because my Narnia books do not have the dedication. But I have heard that Lewis put a dedication to Lucy Barfield, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe specifically, that said something to the effect of, you got older, but this is for you, but someday you'll be old enough to read fairy tales again. Did he really put that in?
Yes, he did. That is absolutely true. C.S. Lewis was very good friends with a man named Owen Barfield. And someday we may have to talk about Owen Barfield, but his thought was challenging, and his books are amazing, but really hard to crack. But he was such good friends with C.S. Lewis. In Surprised by Joy, where he talks about his friendships, he talks about the first friend is that friend you kind of agree with on everything, that you enjoy all the same things. It's basically your doppelganger. And for him, that was a man named Arthur Greeves. But then he says you also then find your second friend, which is a man who has read all the same books as you, but got all the wrong things out of them, disagrees with you about everything, but is interested in the same stuff, just in the wrong way. And this was Owen Barfield. And they were so close for his whole life. Once he got to university, he talks about a prolonged period, which he calls the Great War, which isn't World War I, which C.S. Lewis was in. This was a philosophical argument back and forth with Owen Barfield when Lewis was a strict materialist and Owen Barfield was something called an anthroposophist. And he credits Barfield not with turning him to anthroposophy, but with turning him towards the idea that there's more than strict materialism. Owen Barfield also really saved him. C.S. Lewis was no good with money. And when he started making a lot of money off of his books in a very Christian way, he said, well, I don't need that. Let's give that to charity. but he didn't know the tax rules. So he had none of the money, but all the taxes, and didn't have the money to pay for it. So it was Owen Barfield, who worked as a lawyer, who was able to actually set him up with a trust and take care of him and run a bunch of those things. All this is prefaced to Owen Barfield had a daughter named Lucy, and C.S. Lewis was her godfather. And so, yes, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was absolutely dedicated to Lucy Barfield.
So I love looking up quotes from people. And I am so annoyed how many misquotes are out there now. And unless you have the book in front of you and can find it, it's really hard to tell for sure.
Oh, yeah. And C.S. Lewis in particular is a common target for misquotation.
That drives me crazy.
Yeah.
So Stephen confirmed. This idea that you can be old enough to read fairy tales again, I don't think was new to Lewis. And Lewis and George MacDonald are just tied in my brain for clear reasons. If you know anything about Lewis, he'd attribute so much to George MacDonald, his teacher, even though he'd never met the man. So we have talked about George MacDonald before, so I don't want to go too far down that. But what do you think of this idea of being old enough to pick up a fairy tale again and enjoy it? Because I know a lot of people who don't read fairy tales. Fair enough. But man, I love them. And I get more out of them now, clearly, than I used to.
I think that is so true. And I think the time you give up fairy tales is usually a mistake. But most of us go through that, or most people have gone through that, where when you're young, there's all these stories, but then you get into what? Adolescence, early adulthood, and you want to appear grown up. So you talk about reading things like War and Peace, not Tom Thumb.
I did that, yeah.
Yeah, I think we all did. But then you go back and read Tom Thumb or The Giant's Heart and realize, oh, these are so good. And these are in many ways better than some of those things that are referred to as classics. And I think it's that pattern that C.S. Lewis is referring to.
Yeah, and I think you can read a fairy tale at a very simple, sweet level, and it's wonderful, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But you can also go a level deeper and find some more things in it, which actually did on this one today. So Stevie said it. It's called The Giant's Heart, written by George MacDonald. And because we talked about kennings lately, I actually just thought of a couple kennings for George MacDonald.
Excellent.
I went
Jody the Scald. Here you go.
All right, I'm going with Storysmith, Wonder Weaver, Goblin Singer, and Truth Unveiler. I like the last one best, I think. Truth Unveiling.
I like it.
But he's the teacher. He writes these sweet, simple, beautiful things that we can get stuff out of. So let's do it. Time for a story.
When two children quarrel, a little boy named Buffy Bob runs away from his sister, Trixie Wee. Unfortunately, the two live on the border of Giant Land, so this action is more dangerous than one would first suppose. When Trixie Wee follows after him, the two children end up in a giant's home where they risk being eaten. They must use their wits to escape the giant, and they must accept the aid of strange friends in order to overcome the giant and find safety at last.
Very good. So, spoiler alert, we're going to go through it all. I don't know that we need a spoiler alert. This one's been around a long time, and it's just a short fairy tale. Like I said, it reminds me of Jack and the Beanstalk, but better. And this one has, I feel like the classic elements of a fairy tale. It has the brother and sister and the giants, and yeah, a lot of creatures. So I do apologize in advance for the spiders. I do not appreciate it myself, but they're good guys in this.
I'm really excited to talk about that because that's a shift from a lot of the fairy tales we read. And I think just the names. If I were to tell many people that we're going to talk about a story where the main characters are named Trixie Wee and Buffy Bob, that would instantly turn off many people to this. That is kind of that concept of, well, that's childish. And in some ways it is. It is a children's story. But I assure you, the names don't make this trivial. There is depth to it besides those very, very silly names. And can we just say, I cannot see the name Trixie Wee without thinking of Tricky Woo.
Yeah. The dog from the Harriet books, the pampered little happy dog of Mrs. Oh, what's her name? Pumphrey?
Mrs. Pumphrey.
I got it. Yes, Tricky Woo, but this is Trixie Wee. And she's the older sister of a troublesome little brother. I like that there's a great many children. It's a laborer with his wife and their great many children who live on the borders of giant lands, which is everything's just massive. We know that ahead.
To quote, everything in Giant Land was so big that the common people saw only a mass of awful mountains and clouds, and no living man had ever come from it as far as anybody knew to tell what he had seen in it.
Well, these two kids get in a fight. The sister is such a sister. She's teasing little Buffy Bob.
Buffy Bob has enough. He's been teased too much, and he strikes her.
He boxes her on the ears. Nobody uses that phrase anymore, a box on the ears. But he hits her. He knows he's gonna get in trouble, so he runs away.
It does say he was ashamed. It says Buffy Bob was so sorry and so ashamed of himself that he cried too and ran off into the wood.
But after a while, he's gone a long time. His big sister, who was part of it, she knows she did wrong too, gets worried, and it says that at last she ran into the wood to look for him, though there was more chance of losing herself than of finding him. And turns out that's how it works. She gets totally lost because everything is so big.
She really has no fear here, though. Trixie Wee is a wonderful example of innocence. She's not scared of anything because she doesn't really think she's ever done anything wrong. It says nobody had ever been unkind to Trixie Wee, and therefore she was not afraid of anybody. For Buffy Bob's box on the ear, she did not think worth considering.
You're right. Fully trusting. So she hauls herself into this, it's not a castle. I think it's called a hallway. This enormous house. She goes in through a hole that a giant mouse has nibbled away, and she crawls in. And this place is huge. I would be intimidated. She is not.
Yeah. No one's ever been unkind to her. Why should they be unkind to her here? Although, can I just say, the concept of that giant mouse is a little bit terrifying.
Yes, bigger than her.
We've talked about rodents of unusual size, and this just takes it to a whole nother level. A mouse comparatively the size of a pony? I mean, my goodness.
She is unconcerned, and she sees a fire at the end of this long, long hallway. So she knows there's something at the end, but she's going towards it, and this thing, it says it was not unlike a great iron bucket. It knocks her over when she's on her way there. But again, she's not hurt, so she gets up, and it turns out it's a thimble, and little tiny Trixie lifts it up, it says about an inch, toward wherever it fell from.
Yeah, and while she's doing that, she looks up to see what had dropped it, and it says that she beheld a huge face with spectacles as big as the round windows in a church, bending over her and looking everywhere for the thimble. Trixie Wee is helpful, and she offers up the thimble to this giantess looking down.
The thimble disappears immediately because it is embedded in the folds of a white stocking like a cloud in the sky, which Mrs. Giant was busy darning. And here we learn something about the giantess and her husband. It's a Saturday night. The giantess darned her husband's stockings because he only wears white stockings for Sunday.
To be sure, he did eat little children, but only very little ones. And if it ever crossed his mind that it was wrong to do so, he always said to himself that he wore whiter stockings on Sunday than any other giant in all Giant Land. This, for me, is one of the first areas where we start to see those depths of truth in this story. The giant who is happy to eat little children, but thinks it's okay because his stockings are so white. He's doing this thing, this outward expression of what he considers to be goodness, while meanwhile he's totally ignoring his consciousness and the actual right and wrong of devouring small children. That theme runs throughout this story.
The giantess actually warns Trixie away. She says, run away. And it takes Trixie a while. Trixie Wee, excuse me. I abbreviated it. Trixie Wee, she's little. It takes her a while to figure out that someone's talking because the sound is just so big. It's like this ocean sound, but it's whispering. And she says, run away, run away. My husband eats children.
First of all, she just says, for my husband will be home in a few minutes. And this doesn't worry Trixie. She says, but I've never been naughty to your husband. Looking up at the giant, that doesn't matter. You had better go. He is fond of little children, particularly little girls. Oh, then he won't hurt me. I'm not sure of that. They're arguing back and forth from very different views of the world. The giantess knows that this fondness is a fondness of flavor, and the little girl is in extreme trouble. But again, the little girl is innocent, and she believes that the fact that she hasn't done any harm means that she should not be in danger. Now, obviously, this isn't true. That's not the way the world works, and it's not the way Giant Land works. But you can see where her brain is coming from in this initial interchange between her and the giant lady.
Well, the giantess says that he's fond of little children. So Trixie thinks that means he'll like her. They'll be friends. No, because they taste good. We learned that they taste like radishes.
That's right.
It's pretty gruesome.
I do also like, though, the way the giantess ends this conversation. I'm not sure of that, she said. He is so fond of them that he eats them up, and I am afraid he couldn't help hurting you a little. He's a very good man, though. Mm-hmm. Again, why? Why? The white stockings? So far, that's the only thing on the plus side of his ledger.
So Trixie Wee does get frightened at this moment, but her little brother comes running into her arms, and she's happy to see him, but he's terrified. It says he's pale as death because they hear these loud, long steps behind them. So the brother, Buffy Bob, has run into the hall with her. They're together, but the giant is coming. They can hear it.
And again, the giant's wife is looking out for them and says, run and hide, run and hide. And Trixie Wee sees something that she thinks looks like was called a break. A break is kind of a collection of tree stems. And so they run to the break. It's not a break. It is a giant broom. And those are the bristles of the broom.
And the giant comes in and says, where's that little boy? I mean, all it's missing is the fee-fi-fo-fum.
But we get a great name. We get the giant's name. Thunder Thump.
Now, you ridiculous old Thunder Thump, said his wife, with a smile as broad as the sea and the sun. How can I mend your white stockings and look after little boys? You've got plenty to last you over Sunday, I am sure. Just look what good little boys they are. She's not talking about the two kids in the broom. She's talking about this collection of very doughy, stupid-looking little boys that they have collected, and they feed them up like little animals. It's very gruesome, actually. I was surprised. It's funny, if you read it as things like this as a kid, you accept it easily. Oh, there's little kids, and he pops them in his mouth randomly. We learn he does not like them boiled. Not nearly as good.
Most of these he's planning to pickle. He is fattening them up to pickle them. But again, this is something where you can go deeper with it as you read through it as a grown-up. This larder of little boys are only there because they will not curb their appetites. They're gluttons. They will eat everything that is provided to them as the giant is trying to fatten them up. And it says if they would just stop eating, he would let them go because skinny little boys don't really interest him. But these greedy little boys won't stop eating. So we have this almost German-level morality tale thrust in here at the beginning of this story.
Now and then the giant could not keep his teeth off them and would eat one by the by without salt. Did you ever read the BFG by Roald Dahl?
No, I never have.
That one has giants, I think, like that would eat children. But then the big friendly giant, the BFG, he's friendly, and I think he takes care of the little girl. So this one actually reminded me of that one.
So these little boys who are gluttons and fearful and scared, the giant comes up to him and he says, now tell me the truth, right? Where is the little boy that ran into the hall just now? Whoever tells me a lie shall be instantly boiled, even if he doesn't like boiled little boys.
Yeah, he's worried that he has to make good on his threat because one little boy says, he's in the broom, he's in there, and a little girl with him. They call him the dough-faced boy. They tattle immediately.
Yeah. So gluttons and tattletales.
Snitches.
Mrs. Pigglewiggle needs to come. She would have help for these little boys. She could cure them.
The giantess rationalizes this for herself because she doesn't eat the little boys. But it says she comforts herself with thinking that they were not real boys and girls, but only little pigs pretending to be boys and girls. So it's okay that her husband eats them.
Well, he's a very good man. That's what she told us earlier.
I heard that, yeah. But anyway, the giant looks in the broom, but Trixie Wee and Buffy Bob have a brain on them. Trixie says, hold on to the bristles. So they cling inside this broom. So when he lifts it up, they go with it. So he doesn't find them. The giant gets mad at the little dough-faced boy, the little pig boy, and plops him into boiling water like it's nothing.
Yeah, which is totally a waste on the giant's part because, as you said, he doesn't care for boiled children. But, he said he was going to do it. And as a giant of his word, I guess, he has to follow through. That same concept of this weird morality that it's important that he is honest in keeping his word, even though the thing he wants to do is horribly wicked. It's just a strange way of looking at morality, and it seems to be the natural way for these giants.
He does ask if his supper's ready, and the wife very dutifully looks into the pot. It says she throws the little boy out with the ladle as if he had been a black beetle that had tumbled in and had had the worst of it. It's very callous.
Very callous. It made me think of like a bay leaf, where you throw a bay leaf in a soup or something, and then you take out the leaf because you're only doing it for the flavor. Yeah, that poor little boy.
He was done. But they do have their dinner. It says they have dishes like a vat, and it's some kind of soup thing. And they have a great conversation. This giant husband and wife are very happy together in their way. But at length, the giant said, just in conversing with his wife, I don't feel quite comfortable about that heart of mine. And as he spoke, instead of laying his hand on his bosom, he waved it away towards the corner where the children were peeping from the broom bristles like frightened little mice.
His wife responds, Well, my darling Thunder Thump, answered his wife. I always thought it ought to be nearer home, but you know best, of course. His heart is not with him. He does not have his heart in his chest where it should be. It is somewhere else.
He laughs at her and says, You don't know where it is, wife. I moved it a month ago. This upsets her. She says, You trust any creature alive rather than your own wife. And here she cries. His heart isn't even inside of his body, and it's not with his wife, this person he lives with, and she takes care of him. It's somewhere else.
The tears work. She says, Where have you got it now? She resumed, checking her emotion. Well, Doodlem. Again, the names I love the names. Well, Doodlem, I don't mind telling you, answered the giant soothingly. The great she-eagle has got it for a nest egg. She sits on it night and day and thinks she will bring the greatest eagle out of it that ever sharpened his beaks on the rocks of Mount Skycrack. I can warrant no one else will touch it while she has got it. But she is rather capricious, and I confess I am not easy about it, for the least scratch of one of her claws would do for me at once, and she has claws.
Here there's some credence lent to our story, where the author says, I refer anyone who doubts this part of my story to certain chronicles of giant land preserved among the Celtic nations. It was quite a common thing, I guess, for giants to off-put their heart to keep it safe. That doesn't seem safe at all to me. Evidently, any slice, any claw, anything would kill him. He can feel it even though it's detached from him, but he's going to put it out in an eagle's nest. Seems very unwise.
I think we should talk about this for a moment because this is the main conceit of the story. The idea that this individual can remove the source of life, the source of emotion from his own body and place it somewhere else. That shows up in many stories. George MacDonald here references stories of the Celtic lands, but I've seen it all over the place. There are Norse stories that have the same concept. There's a lot of African stories that have this concept. I've read Native American myths and folklore with these stories. I mean, around the world, this idea that the source of life can be taken somewhere else. And it's never truly safe. Because to be safe, that's just not the way the world works. But it's a different set of risks when it's outside of his body, because he can put it in an area and guard it against things that would harm him, but now other things can harm it. And I was thinking about other more modern stories where this plays such an important role, and there were two in particular that came to mind. This is basically what goes on with Harry Potter and the Horcruxes. The idea of Voldemort splitting his soul, splitting his heart, and having his life essence in these different things. And in many ways, that makes him more powerful, but it also makes him weak because these things have to be guarded. And then the other big one that came to my mind that I think is probably an even clearer picture is, of course, the One Ring. Sauron put so much of himself into that ring that so long as it survived, he would survive. But when that ring was destroyed, he was destroyed. And I see a very similar pattern to what the giant here is doing with his heart and what those characters in those great stories are doing.
Yeah, I agree actually entirely. This, again, you could just read this and plow right through this as a concept, but it struck me because what do you lose? If your heart, the idea of conscience even, is detached from you, you're willing to extract it and leave it somewhere else. What do you lose in terms of how you live and what you choose to do? What's the downside there? And as you say, it's not safer because it's somewhere else. It's not invincible, not at all. It's dramatically exposed, and it crushes his wife's heart.
Yeah,
personally, that he won't trust her with it.
He does explain why, though. He's got reasons why. So you don't seem to think much of these reasons.
I don't, although she does. She says, you could give it to me. I would take great care of it, much better than the eagle.
I think she would.
But the places she suggests are bad. You could hide it at the bottom of our flour barrel. And he says, that would make me feel choky. Well, in the coal cellar or in the dust hole, that's the place. No one would think of looking for your heart in the dust hole. She's just thinking of hiding it. Where would it be hidden that no one could find it? But he's thinking about the feeling worse and worse. He says, the water, but no, too spongy.
You don't want a spongy heart. That's no good at all. Well, he's got plans, though, for what to do. Because, again, he's not happy with it where it is. So he says, I will leave it a month longer where it is, and then I will give it to the queen of the kangaroos, and she will carry it in her pouch for me. It is best to change place, you know, lest my enemy should scent it out. But then he speaks to his dear Doodlem and explains why he doesn't want her to hold it. Because he says she wouldn't be lighthearted and happy. She would be worried and serious taking care of the heart, and he wants her as his little Doodlem and not all serious.
Yeah, he says the responsibility is too much even for him, and that's not what he wants for her. But then he looks at the little boys that he's planning to eat. So I think the motive is clearly a little darker, to not have his heart inside of his body, to not be responsible for that pain of conscience, the feeling of doing wrong, as long as you wear white stockings on Sundays.
Yeah, as long as you wear white stockings on Sundays. There are so many connections I thought about as I read this story again. I know I've done a lot more Doctor Who than you have. Have you watched any episodes with the Cybermen?
No.
The Cybermen are one of the classic villains of Doctor Who. They're a mechanized race, but they are originally people that have been converted into Cybermen. They've been turned into these cyborg androids. And the big thing that's happened to them is they have had their emotions completely removed. They have taken away their emotions, so now they are just slaves of the greater Cybermen order. And in one of the later seasons, they ask the Doctor, why would they do that? Why would they do that? Why would they remove their emotions? And the response is very simple, because they hurt. To have the emotions, to be able to, or to be required to look after your heart, that's hard. I think all humans understand how hard that is. We don't have any other choice. We have to deal with what's in our heart. But the giant came up with another choice, and in so many ways it's a coward's way out. I think he gave up his heart, in part to try and keep it safe, but it's clear that it's not safe. And so why would he do it? I think because it hurts to have a heart in our chest and to feel emotions.
The stories it made me think of, did you ever watch Once Upon a Time?
No, I
It's
never
a TV
have.
show. There are some really fun parts to it. There's also parts that really frustrated me, but a massive part of it is it's a mashup of fairy tales, like ones you've heard of. Think like the Disney fairy tales. And so Snow White's in it. You know, the Evil Queen's in it. The Evil Queen's mom is in it, strangely. And this ability to rip a heart out of someone's chest is a thing. Or they'll preserve their own heart in a casket somewhere, all locked up, right? It's very safe. But in that one, your heart reflects something about who you are. So like Snow White's heart is, brilliant red and pulsing. It's beautiful. But the evil queen's heart is all black, right? So she keeps it very safe, but hers is all black. But yes, this idea that you can extract it and how somehow that gives you great power where you could just crush someone's heart at any point, even when they're away from you, if you have their heart. And in one episode, it's the equivalent of the huntsman from the Snow White story. Well, the queen had taken his heart, but he didn't know it. But he knew something was wrong. He would do things that he hated, but he didn't understand that he didn't have a heart. But he'd have this pain about it afterwards, but she had this compulsion over him. And so I do think there's just a lot of those stories, as you say, with this idea of removing your heart and removing that pain of conscience and the downsides of that.
Yeah. Well, the giants have feasted merrily on this wonderful meal. And what do you do after you've eaten heavily? You fall asleep. Both the giant and his wife fall asleep. And this is the moment for Trixie Wee and Buffy Bob. This is the time for them to escape, and they do, or they at least try to.
They go out through some sort of shed. It is nighttime here, and they try this hole. And it says the giant and the giantess were sleeping, and Buffy Bob always has the same response to any of Trixie Wee's ideas. He says, all right.
He's supportive.
It says he seldom said anything else than, all right. They go out a hole. It's in a mound. They don't really know where they're going because everything's so big. It's all distorted from how they're looking. And they hear this rushing noise, but they can't quite figure out what it is. But we, as the reader, get to know. It's sap in the tree. The pitch is moving up and down in this tree. They come out of a hole into this massive, giant land tree. It's very beautiful.
And I love this for so many reasons. One is just, it really puts you into the concept of what it means to be in giant land. If the tree is large enough that you can hear the sap rushing through it, that gives a wonderful picture of just how big this world is. The other thing I love about it is how it speaks to how alive this tree is, because this is the blood of the tree rushing through it. And we've just met a giant who has no heart. The heart is not pumping blood through the giant. He's basically dead. So we have this wonderful juxtaposition of death and life as they're working their way up the tree, this living thing. And then they get out of it onto the branches with the leaves, and they are out in the world of giant land.
I like this line. It says, overhead were leaves enough to supply all the trees they had ever seen. Just the sheer bigness of it. It's very cool. But this tree is full of giant birds, and they actually get to meet a few. So initially, it's an owl. It says an owl began to hoot. It lands on the branch next to them, and the kids are pinned under its wings, but the owl doesn't like how it feels.
Ew. Ew.
It spreads its wings and kicks them out. I think that's just a very charming detail.
They can understand the words of all the fowl that they come across. And each of the birds sings a different song. There's a lot of song and poetry in here, and they're all kind of funny, and each one is very different. The owl definitely is grumpy, though. Not evil like the giant, but grumpy. Trixie Wee, though, has plans now. She has overheard the giant talk about where that egg is and where the giant's heart is within the egg. And so she is now looking for it, but she needs help. And so she asks the owl, do you know where it is? Please tell me where the eagle lives that sits on the giant's heart. And the owl does not respond kindly. It says, oh, you naughty child, that's a secret, for shame. And then the owl hisses at her. The owl is not going to help them.
I think it's funny that they're birds. They happen across birds. This is a fairy tale. There's a quest, right? They have a mission. They have to go find this thing. I like that Trixie Wee wants to teach the giant good behavior. Teach that guy some manners.
Well, she's an older sister.
Yes, we knew that from the beginning. But the birds here, they don't want to help. They keep secrets, which I guess that makes sense if it's the eagle that's guarding it.
Yeah.
Some camaraderie, that's a secret of the birds.
Yeah, in some ways they are more akin to the eagle than to the children.
Next up is the nightingale, which is very beautiful. It's sitting on a branch with its bright eyes looking up at the moon, because every George MacDonald book, story, anything, he puts in beautiful details, beautiful descriptions. And I do like the nightingale song. But the other thing that these birds do, because we went from the owl to the nightingale, it's a description of the passing of the night, because the owl is earliest in the night for them. But then the nightingale is singing to the moon.
Yeah. And again, the poetry is fun. There are people that go back and forth on George MacDonald's poetry. I mean, even C.S. Lewis in some of his letters says that he could never really enjoy the poetry as much as he loved George MacDonald. But I find the more George MacDonald I read, the more I like them. And I enjoy the poetry of the owl and the nightingale because they're very different. And the nightingale's poetry is beautiful, whereas the owl's is just kind of grumpy.
Yeah, hers is singing about the light have gone away, sing about the light, gone away, down away, and out of sight. Poor lost day, mourning for the day dead, o'er his dim bed. But that's the nightingale, and then we go to the lark. So the lark is the first to welcome the dawn, and it's Mr. Lark and Mrs. Lark.
And so again, we get a conversation, we get banter between a husband and wife, and this time of the larks. The male lark is so excited. He is to be the first to encounter the light as high up as possible. Mrs. Lark doesn't think that's necessarily all that great because the sun comes to her too, where she sits in the nest, so why work so hard? But I love their back and forth.
Yeah, I like this line. Mr. Lark says rather rudely, the darkness is quite thin. I can almost see my own beak. Like it's a pain to him if he sees the sun from his nest. He has to go find the dawning of the sun. And his wife responds that basically he exhausts himself doing this. I am sure you would not mind the sun would not mind if you took it a little easier. Do be quiet and go to sleep again. And the lark, the husband, says, that's not it at all. He doesn't want me. The sun doesn't want me. I want the sun. So he has to go find the sun. I just love the description of the two of them. Even between the larks, they're different. But the husband lark's going to go find the sun. Be the first to see him in the morning.
And it says, and then, bursting into his jubilate, he sprang aloft, clapping his wings like a clock running down, as he flies up to try and encounter the sun. Now, of course, when I see a word like jubilate, it is so well described and so wonderful by George MacDonald because the jubilate is a prayer. It is something called a canticle that's actually taken from one of the Psalms, from Psalm 100. I have in my hands my ACNA Book of Common Prayer 2019 edition, and in the daily morning prayer, there's a sequence of prayers that you move through. And right after a prayer called the Venite, the O come, the invitation, you can also substitute for that the Jubilate, which is Latin for be joyful. And I'm just going to read our Jubilate. O be joyful in the Lord, all you lands. Serve the Lord with gladness and come before his presence with a song. Be assured that the Lord, he is God. It is he that has made us and not we ourselves. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. O go your way into his gates with thanksgiving and into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him and speak good of his name, for the Lord is gracious. His mercy is everlasting, and his truth endures from generation to generation. And if we think that what the lark is doing is his jubilate, that's what his action is. It's a flight and a song and an expression of joy to the Lord who is gracious and his mercy is everlasting and is beautiful.
And that's tucked in here very effectively because the lark's wife asked the kids, can I be of any use to you? And it says she's very sweet and she stays at home with the young larks while her husband went to church. That's his jubilate, his church in the morning at the rising of the sun.
Turns out, though, this is not just any lark. She says, my husband is king of the larks. And I love to hear Buffy Bog took off his cap and Trixie Wee curtsied very low.
It's very polite.
The Mrs. Lark is quite humble. Oh, it's not me, said the bird, looking very shy. I'm only his wife. It's my husband. And she looked up after him into the sky, whence his song was still falling like a shower of musical hailstones. Perhaps she could see him.
The kids are wise enough to compliment the king. They say, oh, he's a splendid bird. But they ask Lady Lark if they know where the eagle lives that guards the giant's heart. And she says, too, that's a secret. And they ask her, did you promise not to tell? She says, no, but larks ought to be discreet. They see more than other birds.
There's a bit more of a back and forth here, but eventually Trixie Wee offers to sing a song herself. She goes to sing a song to the lark's wife, and it's wonderful. It's a great poem, and it kind of mocks the husband a little bit and supports the wisdom of the lark's wife staying at home in the nest.
Basically, the sun comes up while he's up looking for it, but it's too cloudy for him to find it. And so he goes back to the nest disappointed, and the sun has been shining on Lady Lark this whole time while he was been up searching for it and couldn't find it. Trixie Wee just knew a song specifically for this wife lark. It's very sweet, actually. But the lark's hilarious. They're all like this because she's shocked Trixie Wee can sing. She says, you haven't got wings. Looking at things from your own perspective very much. So the larks can sing, but they also have wings. So these things go together. Trixie Wee can sing, but she's shocked she can do it because she's not like them. Doesn't have the wings.
This definitely works, though, to butter up the lark's wife. And Trixie Wee again asks, tell us where the she-eagle lives, please. Well, I don't think there can be much harm in telling such wise, good children, said Lady Lark. Again, they're on her good side now. But the news is not pleasant. She says she lives on the very topmost peak of Mount Skycrack, and the only way to get up is to climb on the spider's webs that cover it from top to bottom.
And she's like, what are you going to do? And Trixie Wee says, that's a secret. She flips it on her. Lady Lark is a little offended and leaves her alone.
But now they know what they need to do. The spiders, and enter the spiders. Spiders in most of the stories we've told or talked about have been wicked and evil and the bad guys and just generally gross. I mean, I'm thinking obviously of Mirkwood and Bilbo, thinking of Shelob in Lord of the Rings. But here, the spiders need to be the ones to help them. And brave the little children, they proceed towards the spiders, and they find one. There's one upside down in water, struggling, and they're able, by a whole lot of tugging and pulling, to right the spider, get him out of the water, and they save the life of this spider.
And then he's very helpful because they helped him. He was willing to help them. He's like, oh, no problem. Just run up the webs. Tell them I sent you. And they respond like, we don't have claws like you. All these creatures are only used to their own selves. Like, you don't have claws? What's wrong with you? But he does help them and makes them able to walk along these webs. And then there is this congregation of spiders, which, Steven, it's so gross.
The children find it the same way. But I do enjoy how helpful the description of climbing up the spider's web, where every time where they think it would be helpful to have a handhold, this web just spins out for them so that they can climb and get up there.
Because Mount Skycrack is a serious mountain in Giant Land. Like, this is a long trek, especially for little kids. It would be impossible without the help of these spiders. And this team of arachnids agrees to help them, which I find very unsettling.
They do ask what the children want to do, and Trixie Wee is very clear here. She wants to basically get control over the giant and teach him better manners.
But the spider says, if you get to the heart of the giant, you will find it as large as one of your elephants. What can you do with it? And Buffy Bob says, the least scratch will kill it. And the spiders have a little wisdom. They say, but you might do better than that. We have resolved to help you. Here is a little bag of spider juice. Giants cannot bear spiders, and this juice is dreadful poison to them. We are all ready to go up with you and drive the eagle away. Then you must put the heart into this other bag and bring it down with you, for then the giant will be in your power. They're going to shrink the heart using this spider juice and then put it in this little bag. Very helpful spiders.
The spiders seem to have this whole technology about bags. They really are good with this because before this, they had fed the children with honey bags so that they could eat. And there's a spider poison bag, and then that's going to shrink the heart. And the spiders offer to give the children basically a ride up because the children are going to climb too slow, and then there is an army of spiders behind them. And the children ask, what's that for? And they say, don't worry about it. We have to move the eagle because the she-eagle is going to be sitting on the egg. And you can just imagine this ascent of this spider army with these two children riding spiders up to the top. It's pretty cool.
Clearly, Stephen picked this story, so. Spiders are gross, but they do help.
You can pick a snake story next.
I feel like we've done a lot of snake stories, so maybe I'm due. But these spiders are super, super helpful. All but the two that the kids are riding on go into the eagle's nest and get in her feathers. And she doesn't like it. And eventually she rises up and flaps them out of her wings and goes to rinse off. And the kids can see this giant's heart, and it's massive. But they have a bag of spider juice, and they shrink it down and put it in a sack, ready to go.
The kids are a little worried at this point, is what do we do now, sort of? And they say, if you should find it at all troublesome, just give it a little more spider juice directly. So they've got a plan. They've got the juice.
The moment that Trixie puts the spider juice on the heart, though, they can hear at a distance this great roar of pain. The giant can feel it. Even far away, he knows something happened. He can feel the pain of it. But they carry it down and are headed back toward him.
And the exchange here, because he cries out, "Oh, my heart, my heart." And his wife says, "Your heart is safe enough, dear Thunderstump," said his wife. And yes, it is Thunderstump. He got the names mixed up because it was Thunder Thump earlier. "Really, a man of your size ought not to be so nervous and apprehensive. I am ashamed of you." And his response here is great. He tells his wife, "You have no heart." He has no heart. His heart is God, but he's accusing his wife of having no heart. But he knows he's in trouble. And after this, it says he fainted again, for Trixie Wee, finding the heart beginning to swell a little, had given it the least touch of spider juice.
He can feel the heart coming closer to him. And he's telling his wife, "It's in the house. I know." He can feel it. And he looks around for it everywhere. But the kids walk back in that same hole that they went through before, and they walk boldly towards the giant. Both kept their eyes busy watching him. Led by the love of his own heart, the giant soon spied them and staggered furiously towards them, threatening to eat them. He says, "Here with my heart, I will eat you, you vermin."
But Trixie is up to this. She is ready, and she gives the heart a sharp pinch. She is in control at this point, and with that sharp pinch, the giant falls to his knees. Now, Trixie is willing to do some negotiating here. She says, "You shall have it if you behave yourself properly." And this goes into a back and forth of what does that mean? Well, obviously, the first thing he needs to do is to take all those little boys home.
He's a terrible negotiator. He cannot negotiate with an older sister.
Can any of us?
I'm too sick. I can't do it. You have to give me my heart. Like, that's going to work. It doesn't. She makes him collect all the little boys, all the children that they've been collecting. He puts some in his pocket and in his hat, and he carries them off away from his house, away from Giantland. All this time, poor Doodlem is sitting in her armchair, crying and mending a white stocking. This is a hard time for the wife. She wanted him to be okay. She believes him to be a good man, even though he had no heart and wouldn't trust her with it. Mm-hmm. This is a hard time for her.
Yeah, it is. And the giant, even here, we see that on this whole moral scale, he's not that great. Because she says, "Have you put them all down, Mr. Thunderthump?" asked Trixie Wee. "Yes," said the giant. "That's a lie," squeaked a little voice, and out came a head from the waistcoat pocket. He had tried to hide one of the little boys. Well, Trixie Wee isn't having any of this, and she pinched the heart again and says, "You're not a gentleman. You tell stories."
Thunderthump, crying, says he was the thinnest of the lot. Like, that's a good reason.
The next thing is great because after the children are freed, Trixie Wee has a couple other requirements. She makes him promise to never cross the borders of Giantland. She makes him promise to never come after them with revenge. And then the cruelest cut of all, Trixie Wee says, "And you shall never again wear white stockings on a Sunday all your life long. Do you promise?" The giant hesitated at this and began to expostulate, but Trixie Wee, believing it would be good for his morals, insisted, and the giant promised.
Here's where he promises that his wife shall keep it. He's not promising to carry inside himself. Still, his wife can have it. Only she must not put it in the flour barrel or in the dust hole. Trixie Wee says, certainly not. Make your own bargain with her. And you promise not to interfere with my brother and me, or to take any revenge for what we have done? Yes, yes, I promise everything. Do pray make haste and give me back my poor heart. She's going to. She's gonna give it back to him.
Trixie Wee began to undo the mouth of the bag. But Buffy Bob, who had got very knowing on his travels, took out his knife with the pretense of cutting the string, but in reality to prepared for any emergency.
No sooner was the heart out of the bag than it expanded to the size of a bullock, and the giant, with a yell of rage and vengeance, rushed on the two children, who had stepped sideways from the terrible heart. But Buffy Bob was too quick for Thunderthump. He sprang to the heart and buried his knife in it up to the hilt. A fountain of blood sprouted from it, and with a dreadful groan the giant fell dead at the feet of little Trixie Wee, who could not help being sorry for him after all.
The end. Well, it's a bit of an abrupt ending.
It's a fairy tale. Lesson learned.
But again, if I were to take one overarching motif, it's the concept of true virtue versus feigned virtue, right? This veneer of decent behavior and politeness, white stockings and thinking you're good because you look good or do a certain thing. That's not the point. The point is true virtue, true acting right. And the giant will never do it. He will never do it. Even at the very end, everything he says is a lie. And it ends with his destruction because of that.
Poor Doodlem.
Poor Dude. I do feel bad for Doodlem because she was sweet.
She believed him to be good. So, like I said, C.S. Lewis and George MacDonald are kind of inseparable for me because I don't think I would have ever known about George MacDonald without C.S. Lewis. And it's been a while since I read The Four Loves. I went and looked for a quote from it. So I hope this is right because it's definitely similar because I have read it, but I had to pick it up quickly. But here we go. Love anything, and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly be broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give your heart to no one, not even to an animal. Lock it up safe in the casket of your own selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, irredeemable. And there's more, but I just felt, even referencing not even giving it to an animal, he gave it to an eagle. He was planning to give it to a kangaroo.
That's right. I can confirm that is 100% C.S. Lewis.
I knew it was at least similar, but man, the misquotes out there. I'm not a fan of that.
Oh, yeah, they're extensive. There's a lot of them.
But this idea that as you said, the pain, the burden of wrong choices and conscience within us, what a gift. What a gift. Where if you don't have it, what do you turn into? Basically a monster. Without that burden, without that heart, without that really love inside you, you turn into something bad.
So I'm old enough now that I've basically given up the concept of ever actually writing anything of meaning. I think I've read too much it's all been said before and by much, much better authors than me, but I've always had in the back of my mind this idea of a story that is in some ways parallel to this. Because again, this concept of being able to hide your heart somewhere else is frequent in fairy tales. But I think of the passage in the New Testament that talks about our hearts are hidden in Christ. And I wonder if a story could be told where who keeps your heart makes a difference. Because if he had given his heart to Doodlem, it probably wouldn't have ended this way. And would his heart have been better for it? And I think that concept, if you're hiding your heart in an egg or in a casket or giving it to a monster or a witch, that's not going to go well. But if it is literally Christ that is holding our hearts, maybe you could have a surprise ending to that, a twist in this form of the story. So, all you out there that are far more skilled at writing than I, just a suggestion, but I think there could be something to that.
Good story prompt. Well, brother, I'm going to tell you a quick story because I don't think you've read this one, and I got a parallel with the keeping of heart. I like this sentence. So this is called Port in a Storm, and I will tell it shortly, but this is another George MacDonald short story that's in my printing of A Giant's Heart. They're printed together. So do you know this one?
No, I don't.
Port in a Storm. So this is not a fairy tale. This is a man and a woman on their anniversary with their family sitting around the fire. They had dinner early because they're celebrating their anniversary and they're spending it together as a family. He has a jug of burgundy wine next to him. He's sitting next to his wife holding her hand. And their eldest daughter, Effie, and this might be part of a bigger publication that I don't know about because they reference a side story with their daughter that comes later. So this is just a little snippet. But Effie basically asks, how did you meet? How did you and Mom meet? And he laughs and says, yes, I paid a dozen of port for her. That's a dozen bottles of port. This is shocking news. You paid money? You paid a bribe to marry this woman? But they look at each other. Clearly there's a story here. And so he starts going back in his memory. And so he lived in a house with his father, an old manor house, until he was 5. And his father had died as they moved to Madeira. Madeira was always a thing in old English books. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, it does show up a lot, doesn't it?
People go to Madeira, I think, when they had money, maybe to...
It must be warm.
I think it was.
That's my guess. It's warm.
But his mother had passed and his father died when he was young. So he lived in this house, but hadn't lived there a long time. And then he went to school for years and years. But he had an uncle who was an old jolly tar. He was an admiral at some point in these ships. But as he gets older, his uncle invites him back to the manor house. Apparently it had been empty for years. And his uncle had married another woman who had a daughter. And they're all invited for Christmas. It's going to be this kind of long-lost family reunion. And so this young man goes back to this house, and the descriptions of the house that he remembers as a kid, because it's stately, but it's also home, and the kind of the poignancy of that. But then he sees the daughter. It's the daughter of his now aunt that his uncle had just married. He says, but the moment Kate Thornberry entered the house, I lost my heart and have never found it again to this day. I get on wonderfully well without it. Wonderfully well without it, though, for I have got the loan of a far better one till I find my own, which therefore I hope I never shall. I hope I never shall find my own. I thought that as I was reading The Giant's Heart, here he's telling this whole story about meeting this girl, lost his heart to her, but he gets the loan of hers and he never wants his back. Maybe that's why I felt such sympathy with Doodlem.
Yeah.
Because he never shared his heart with her. He outsourced it. But here, this man and this woman, it's their story of exchanging hearts and taking better care of it going forward. I thought it was beautiful. I will wrap up the rest of the story quickly, though. It's Christmas time, and port is non-negotiable. Per custom and just tradition, you must have many bottles of port. So they go down to the cellar to prepare for the party, because he had invited people. There were only 12 bottles of port. And he is shocked that the family hadn't laid down more. This is just reprehensible. So he immediately sends out this order to Liverpool for 30 dozen bottles of port to host a small gathering for Christmas. It's shocking.
Wow.
But the weather goes bad. And all the time, the guy telling the story is thinking about how to talk to this girl. He's so awkward, and adult them, they're so sweet. She's like, no, I was awkward, they're looking back at this time. But he basically asked his uncle, like, what would you give me if I provided the port? He's like, the house, done. No, I didn't mean it. And his uncle's getting very tense on Christmas Day because there's no port and somebody's going to say something, and he's just terrified of this moment that will happen, just shockingly bad behavior. He asked permission to marry this girl. And the uncle says, if she'll have you, yes. The boy had a dream. This young man had a dream way back in his memory banks when he left the house when he was 5, that they'd walled up the cellar. So he takes this girl with candles down to this just dusty old cellar that's empty, and they break through a wall to find dozens of bottles of port, and they are heroes. As they bring it upstairs, they describe the glug, glug, glug as they pour out the port, and the party is saved. His uncle is happy. Kate, of course, said yes because they are happily married all this time later. But it's a play on words, the port and the storm, because his uncle is also an admiral. And so I love the double meaning of it. She is his port in the storm, but they literally found port in the storm. It was just such a different story from George MacDonald, just this love story looking back at their life. Did you like it?
I did. I love that.
It's so sweet.
Doesn't that just give, what was our Lord's first miracle? It was providing wine to make a wedding more merry. And I think there is some of that flavor in that story.
Very true. I know. I told her really quick. After they've made this party, all is well. Although 30 dozen bottles of port is a lot. I'm shocked. The Admiral kept his word and interposed no difficulties between Kate and me. I do not believe he could have been more grateful if I had saved his ship and its whole crew, for his hospitality was at stake. Kind old man. Here ended my father's story with a light sigh, a gaze into the bright coals, a kiss of my mother's hand, which he held in his, and another glass of Burgundy. The end.
And with that, we'll turn the page, and we hope you join us for the next chapter.